Folks, this is Fernando doing another video for more survivalists. I've actually got a pretty good question through email a couple days ago. It was asking about how to financially survive an economic crisis or even an economic collapse. If you don't have any crazy amounts of savings or investments, you're just an ordinary Joe getting by month, how do you deal with that during an economic crisis where inflation is rampant, prices are impossible, you have inflation that it's 30, 40, 50% a year? How you deal with that as a normal guy just trying to get by? At the same time, unemployment it's crazy. How do you manage with that? Well, it's basically about two things that you have to keep in mind. The first one is reducing your expenses as much as possible. The first one is making as much money as possible as well. All right. Regarding the first one, reducing your expenses as much as possible, and keep in mind this is coming from someone from South America. All right. For folks that come from that kind of places, the kind of money thrown away by people in developed countries it's just staggering. We just cannot believe it. We're not used to that kind of mass consumption of everything, of just buying and throwing stuff all the time, obsession with buying the latest, fanciest car, cell phone, clothes. That's the kind of thing that we're really not used to. Even for middle classes or upper middle classes, there's much more respect for money in terms of not throwing it away. All right, and in developed countries, and this is something that it's particularly I've noticed specifically in the United States mostly. Even in middle class or even people that consider themselves poor, they just throw money away in ways that people from third world nations just cannot believe, and they just have a completely understanding of what is a necessity or not. And this is pretty interesting as well in terms of cost of living, specifically regarding people from the United States considering cost of living in South America or in Central America, and they're considering about maybe relocating, becoming expats, because they look into it a little bit and they have these numbers. They're told that the cost of living in Argentina or in Uruguay or Chile or Panama is $700. And they go like, man, that's amazing. I can live well for $700. Well, no. The thing is that in the mind of someone from South America or someone from Central America, lots of the things that you just take for granted are luxuries or not even necessary. When you're being told, for example, that you can live in Uruguay for $700 a month, or the average salary is $500 a month. All right, $500 average a month as a salary in Uruguay, that may be possible, but that's keeping in mind that they don't consider that the average person should maybe even have a car. All right, and the place they live is not going to be very big or particularly nice. Maybe internet is not taking account into that number that they're giving you. All right, this is particularly the case of realtors trying to sell the idea of cheap living in these kind of places. And there's something there as well in terms of cost of living. When you have to deal with insane amounts of inflation, of very high inflation, and you have to cut your expenses as much as possible, this comes into play a lot. All right, so going back to the topic of how do you financially deal with the economic aspects of an economic collapse, reducing your expenses as much as possible. You don't have to go eat out every single day. You don't have to go to fancy restaurants every weekend. The idea of takeaway as something that you do normally so as to put food on the table, that's simply a waste of time, of money. It's actually very expensive, and you see this in even in poor America. Poor Americans, they will just buy takeaway, pizzas delivered, all these things when it's so much cheaper to just cook it yourself and healthier as well. So the kind of vehicle that you're driving, having 2-3 cars maybe just parked there, you're paying insurance for cars that you're not even using. Maybe instead of having 2, just having 1. And maybe instead of having 1 that has a huge expense of gas per mile, you buy one that's much more fuel efficient so as to cut on your expenses. Maybe even a smaller car. Maybe you don't like it as much because it's not looking as cool as a big truck, but it's much cheaper to drive around in. So cutting your expenses as much as possible to the bare minimum. All these things that you probably think that you need, most likely you do not, all right? Other than having a roof over your head and having food on your plate, everything else is, you can analyze it more carefully and decide if it's necessary or not. There's a good chance that you have, silly things like your cell phone plan, people overpaying for data consumption or text messages. Just go for the cheapest possible plan that they have, and sometimes it's not even getting a plan. It's just having one of these pay-as-you-go deals where you just put a few bucks and you use just as much as you have. Very typical of Latin America. Just putting there $5-10 and little by little spending as little as you can each month. And here's where people think, well, but it's much cheaper if I just buy a plan and I'm paying 15, 20, 25, 30 bucks a month because I'm still going to be using it a lot, so it makes sense to me. Or I have 2-3 phones there, so I have a plan. Well, it's not cheaper if you're spending more money, all right? Maybe you have to use your cell phone less. All right, one of those drastic life changes that you may not even have considered possible, but a simple reality. Maybe you just have to use it less. Maybe you just have to be very careful not to use it more than a few minutes each month, or only keeping it for emergencies, and emergencies only, strictly for that. Anything else, you just go for Wi-Fi hotspots wherever you can, wherever possible, and you just don't use your freaking cell phone anymore. These are all the little decisions that you have to make when things are so tight, economically speaking. All right, when you just don't have the money to do anything else, you just start, you buy cheaper, you spend much less money. Every single buck that you spend, you think about it 100 times. All right, that's the kind of mentality that you need so as to cover the first part. Now, on the second aspect is the money. We're talking about spending as little as possible, but on the other hand, you also need an income. You need money going in. So if we're not talking about you having any investments, any savings specifically, and not even having someone that can help you out, well, these are all things that a lot of people are dealing with as of right now. And I read this in the forums, in the survival forums all the time. I see these guys that have been preparing for decades, guys that consider themselves hardcore survivalists because they have the guns, they have the supplies, they have all this stuff. Maybe they have even the survival homestead ranch thing with some food that they're growing, and they have all this out, and all of a sudden they lose their job, and they don't have a job anymore, and they don't have an income anymore. But the world hasn't collapsed. It hasn't become the end of the world as they were expecting. All of a sudden, the simple fact is they have no money coming into their accounts anymore. They have to find any other way. And when they lose a job, they don't have the money coming in. They have all this structure that is expensive to sustain. So they're not covering the first aspect of minimizing the expenses as much as possible. They already have all this deal. Maybe they have animals that they have to pay so as to keep fed. All right, all these things, suddenly the fantasy collides with reality in a very brutal way. And I've seen this so many times over the years. Folks that all of a sudden they just post on it, I just lost my job, And one of the first things I've noticed over the years, many times people start posting, I lost my job, I sold my guns, I sold my truck, I sold some of my ammunition, the one that had gone up in price. So they ended up selling this stuff because obviously their plans haven't included the possibility of something as, that's a very common mistake, just overlooking the most likely things to happen. What is likely to happen to you? Losing your job, having financial problems, getting sick. All these things are so much more likely than having to fight against Putin in a Third World War scenario, or with North Korean guys parachuting over your hometown. All these things that a lot of people focus on because it's so much more entertaining and fun, rather than thinking of these other boring things. But when it happens, it catches people by surprise. So you end up selling stuff, and what you have to go out there looking for a job. That's simply the only option that you have. So specifically about going out looking for a job when there's none to be found, when there's a very tough employment situation. In my case in Argentina, it was about 25% at least. I mean, talking about official numbers back in the day, 25%. It could have been anywhere from 30, 40%. It was a very bad situation. People that lost their jobs ended up going without a job for maybe even years, and simply that was it. Now, I was looking for a job about that time when unemployment was about 25, 30%. And you know what? I got 2 job offers in a matter of a week. I'm not kidding. 2 job offers in a matter of a week. The first one was thanks to networking, thanks to a friend of my wife's, my wife's family company. They knew a guy that knew a guy, and basically through that, they found someone that was looking specifically for someone that was, for drawing plans, for drawing plans of air conditioning installations. All right, that was actually a pretty good job. I was also, and this is a good example because the first job that I got, the first job offer that I got was thanks to networking, which is crucial. When things are this bad, most jobs they just disappear before they even hit the market, because someone knows someone that's already looking for a job. And there's the advantage of hiring and bringing to your business someone that has a first-hand reference of someone that comes with a good recommendation, or someone that it's not a complete stranger. All right, that has a value. So it doesn't sound very fair. Doesn't sound like ideal, but it is what it is. In most cases, when things are this tight, it's just a matter of networking, of going through friends, family. That the network that you have is going to be one of your best tools so as to find a job when unemployment is that bad. The second one that I got, the second job offer that I got, it was I just had picked up the paper, or maybe it was online, and I just showed up to the job interview. It was for an architecture firm, and there was some people there. Usually they have when there's this bad of a situation of unemployment, they usually have any little firm offering any job at all has dozens of, if not even hundreds of people applying for that job. So it becomes extremely competitive. So I showed up for this job interview, and it was for the normal position of someone working in an architecture firm doing CAD drawings and maybe budgeting and maybe showing up to the job, the construction site and such, as you gain a little bit more experience. So they started asking me all these questions and such, and all of a sudden they asked me about a computer program that I honestly didn't know about. And when they asked me if I knew if I had experience using this program, I just looked at the lady in the eye. I told her, no, I haven't used it before, but you know what? That's not a problem. In a couple days, I'll know how to use it, and before you know it, I'm going to be using it as if I had been using it my entire life. It's no big deal. And when they called me, so as to tell me that I had that job if I wanted it, she told me that the thing that got me the job was that answer that I gave her. The saying that a program that I wasn't familiar with wasn't an inconvenience at all, that I had such confidence that I would learn how to use it in no time, and that can-do attitude, that problem-resolving mentality was the thing that they liked the most, and that's the thing that got me that job if I wanted it. I ended up going for the other one, but that's not the point. The point is that I had those two in such a short period of time. So it's about the people you know, the network that you make. It's also about what you can actually offer in terms of training skills and such. But to be completely honest, at least the way I see it, it's a lot about the personality that you present, how you present yourself to the potential employer. And what they're thinking is this guy going to be helping? Is this guy going to be solving the problems that I'm going to be bringing? Is he going to be efficient at what he does? Or is he going to be more problem than he actually is solving? So yes, it's important to have certain skills, and sometimes finding a job is about learning a certain, having a certain skill that is in demand. That's also true. But the attitude that you have, that's essential, that's key. So yeah, and then of course you have a lot of people that they showed up for the interviews, they didn't find a job, and they decided to go on business on their own. And that's another legitimate way of creating income for yourself. A lot of people ended up doing that. Maybe one of the things that, if you want to look at that way, you can benefit from is that during a situation like this, a lot of people had to reinvent themselves in terms of what they were doing. Maybe it was a lawyer that all of a sudden started, well, I actually know the mother of a friend of mine, that she was a lawyer, lost her job, and she started selling soaps and little breakfast baskets, and she was actually doing okay with that. She wasn't making a ton of money, but she was happy enough, and she was making some money with it. A lot of people went on their own businesses when they lost their jobs, their career, corporation jobs. They started doing something on their own, and they just got by with that. All sorts of stories like that, for sure. So folks, just a few more things on how to deal with an economic collapse from the financial perspective. If you want to learn more about dealing with economic collapse, the Modern Survival Manual, my book, available there below in the links, Surviving the Economic Collapse, based on my experience in Argentina, with a ton of useful information. Guys, it's going to be all for now. Yeah, I have a new Facebook page, so if you want to join that, look at some of the buttons over there in the channel, and that's going to be it. See you on our next video. Have a great day.